to educate you or anyone else watching this who believes that paying reparations to Black people is somehow this grandiose, asinine idea. Firstly, your comment signals to me that you are not on an active anti-racism journey. Because if you were truly aware of just how deep the systematic racism is in the US and how Black people today can still be feeling the effects of slavery without ever having been enslaved, you would be angry. You would want to do something about it. And with that knowledge, you would absolutely be on board for reparations, no question. And I understand not being on board with reparations because there was a time when I wasn't on board with reparations. Several years ago, I would have acknowledged how egregious slavery was. I would have acknowledged that I have white privilege. I would have agreed that racism still exists and affects Black people today. But where I drew the line was reparations. My thinking back then was, why should I, as a white person who was never an enslaver, have to pay taxes or whatever the system would be to Black people today who were never enslaved? But the reason that I had that stance was out of sheer ignorance.
Absolutely, I support reparations for the descendants of enslaved Africans in America. As a white man running for governor, I recognize the deep scars left by slavery and the ongoing systemic racism that continues to affect the Black communities. It's not just about acknowledging the past, it's about taking concrete steps to address the economic and social inequalities that persist today. As governor, I'll make it my mission to ensure that Black residents of West Virginia, especially those who are descendants of enslaved Americans, receive reparations. This is about justice, about making things right, about helping our state heal and move forward together.
Family, the largest percentage of white people are usually against reparations, and the question they ask is that why should they pay reparations and they never owned slaves, and the people who are being paid right now were not slaves in the time? That's the very common question that is asked, when it comes to matters reparation. But there's this new group of white people who are woke, white people who want the best for Black folks, who know why Black people do deserve reparations today. If you're aware how deep the systemic racism is in the US, how Blacks today are still feeling the effects of slavery without ever having been enslaved, you wouldn't be against, reparations. And in this video, you will see white people talk about reparations and teach other white people why Black folks truly deserve reparations. So guys, I want you to listen to this video keenly. Once it's done, we will get back and do a critical analysis about the same. Let's watch this video together, family.
Absolutely, I support reparations for the descendants of enslaved Africans in America. As a white man running for governor, I recognize the deep scars left by slavery and the ongoing systemic racism that continues to affect the Black communities. It's not just about acknowledging the past, it's about taking concrete steps to address the economic and social inequalities that persist today. As governor, I'll make it my mission to ensure that Black residents of West Virginia, especially those who are descendants of enslaved Americans, receive reparations. This is about justice, about making things right, about helping our state heal and move forward together. And let's take a cue from California. They're leading the charge with innovative approaches to reparations, setting up structures to determine eligibility and ensure fairness. We can learn from their example and tailor a program that fits West Virginia's unique needs and history. This isn't a formal policy speech. This is just me talking to you heart to heart. It's time for change, and I'm committed to being a part of that change. Let's work together to create a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. It's the least we can do, and it's long overdue.
Hello. I'm going to go ahead and assume that this question is not genuine solely based on the other comments that you have left. However, I would love, nonetheless, an opportunity to try to educate you or anyone else watching this who believes that paying reparations to Black people is somehow this grandiose, asinine idea. Firstly, your comment signals to me that you are not on an active anti-racism journey. Because if you were truly aware of just how deep the systematic racism is in the US and how Black people today can still be feeling the effects of slavery without ever having been enslaved, you would be angry. you would want to do something about it. And with that knowledge, you would absolutely be on board for reparations, no question. And I understand not being on board with reparations because there was a time when I wasn't on board with reparations. Several years ago, I would have acknowledged how egregious slavery was. I would have acknowledged that I have white privilege. I would have agreed that racism still exists and affects Black people today. But where I drew the line was reparations. My thinking back then was, why should I, as a white person who was never an enslaver, have to pay taxes or whatever the system would be to Black people today who were never enslaved? But the reason that I had that stance was out of sheer ignorance. It was because I was missing some very crucial pieces to the puzzle and couldn't see the whole picture. I wasn't educated enough on how deeply slavery has impacted generation after generation and is still impacting Black people today. And once I gained that knowledge, learning from Black people, might I add, something clicked, and now I'm on board with reparations. Not so fun fact, did you know that DC enslavers got reparations after the emancipation? Yeah, $300 per person to offset their loss of enslaved peoples. So post-slavery, there were some white people getting paid, but not the Black people who were enslaved. Also, not so fun fact, did you know that white families have 10 times the amount of wealth as Black families? And that wealth gap is not because white people are smarter, it's not because white people work harder, and it's not because white people picked themselves up by their bootstraps and Black people didn't. It's because throughout history, white people and white families have been allowed to accrue wealth while Black people have been stripped of it. Reparations is a necessary and crucial piece of healing that is hundreds of years overdue. And not just for descendants of enslaved peoples, but for all of us.
So I did a video where I advocated for reparations for African Americans who are descended from slaves. And surprisingly, almost all the feedback was pretty positive. I guess it didn't make it over to MAGA Talk. So there is this question here, though, which is basically, if we were going to do that, where would the money come from? And that's one of the impediments. A lot of people think, well, we just can't possibly afford to pay that. Now, the question becomes value anyway, right? But I want to make the case right now that money is not the issue. Being able to pay reparations to every African American who is descended from slavery is possible. The money could be paid. The question is how much. So I want to run through one example of how this could be done just to prove that it's absolutely possible. I'm not saying this is the right formula. I'm just saying it's a formula that shows that this is possible. So let's do a little math. It's not going to be that complicated. I'm going to use some rounded off numbers because I'm not trying to be precise here. I'm just trying to show that this can absolutely be done. So let's start with the population of Black people who are Americans. That number as of 2023 was about 48 million people. But we can't use that full number as our population that we need to be paying reparations to because, of course, some Black people here, their ancestors were not enslaved. Others, maybe moved here from Africa, from Nigeria, from Uganda, from Ghana, or wherever, or from the UK. Their ancestors were not enslaved. They should be excluded from this because that's not what we're trying to repair. We're trying to repair the family lineage for those whose families were enslaved. And so we need to narrow it down. So I don't know how reliable this is, but I saw it in a couple different places saying that 57% of Black Americans claim that their ancestors were enslaved. I'm going to use that again. I don't know how accurate it is, but let's just use that number. And so if we take that 48 million number and take 57% of that, that gives us a total population of 27,360,000 people. So that's our population. And I'm comfortable enough to use that number just for this process. But then we have to figure out money. How much money could the United States possibly throw at something that they wanted to repair? Well, we have one recent example, and I'm just going to use that number. Do y'all remember COVID happened a few years back? Kind of a big story. There was a program that the United States government put out called the PPP program, or the Paycheck Protection Program. Do you remember that? I bet you do. The United States, at the drop of a hat, when they wanted to, set aside $793 billion for the PPP program. And so if we do just one more equation and we take that $793 billion and we divide it by the 27,360,000 people we have in our class of people, that provides about $29,000 to each person in that group. And again, I don't know that that's right. Clearly, that's not enough if we actually do the economics behind what was lost through slavery. So please don't come for me on that. I'm not saying this is the right number. I'm saying that if we can, at the drop of a hat, drop $793 billion, double it, and pay everybody $60,000, that might not be the right number, but it proves that it absolutely can be done if we wanted to do it. But of course, before we ever discuss value on the topic of reparations, we got to get more people on board with the concept that it's fair, right, decent, and long overdue.
So last night I was reading and I came across some articles about reparations, and I came across the stats that say that 85% of white America are opposed to giving people of color reparations. Of course, it's the excuse of, well, people of color aren't slaves today. I didn't have slaves, so why do I have to pay? Then I read some other articles about America's history of giving reparations to the Japanese during World War II, Native Americans, how those that suffered the Holocaust have also received reparations. And I thought, well, a lot of people that are saying, well, I wasn't here for that. Why do I have to pay? Well, you weren't here for those things either. Many of you. But we paid. Maybe you or your family members didn't take part in the atrocities that happened to those groups of people, but we didn't oppose paying. You don't see the problem with that?
Hey white people, it's Juneteenth, and that means that we are celebrating the freedom of Black Americans who had been enslaved. And while it is a beautiful day in history when finally all enslaved Americans were able to have the knowledge that they were now free, if we know anything about history, we know that it took a long time for there to be actual freedom in terms of things like civil rights, and that we are still fighting an oppressive white supremacist system of government, and there are many ways in which many people are still enslaved to that system. So it is a day for celebration, but it's also a day to reflect and say, what more can we do? How much farther do we need to go? Very far. We have pretty far to go still. But that doesn't take away from the celebration. As a white person, what can you do to celebrate Juneteenth? You can refrain from questioning why we have such a holiday and why it needs to be a federal holiday, which it now is. We don't need white people. We don't need to question the validity of this holiday. We need to understand that it is a valid day to have, and let's celebrate it as such. Things that you can do, active things, like things you can actually do, is support Black-owned businesses today. Do a little Google search and find out in your area, where is there a Black-owned restaurant, store? What are the things that you can do to support the Black community where you live? Maybe you need something done in your home. Let's go to a Black-owned electrician company or air conditioning maintenance company or a contractor. Let's try to give money to communities that have been systemically oppressed over the years. It doesn't look like reparations are coming anytime soon, so think about how you can incorporate a form of reparations in your own life. Happy Juneteenth.
This is a message for the white people who don't understand or care about Juneteenth. Now, you might think, like the president, it's a holiday that isn't worth honoring because it doesn't have anything to do with you or white people. Or you might wonder why we white people have to be reminded of that inconvenient, uncomfortable thing, chattel slavery, that happened so long ago. Aren't we past that? No, we are absolutely unequivocally not past that. But years ago, I would have agreed with you. And I have 3 thoughts on that and a bonus thought for the woke people at the end. But first, so you know that I'm not an out-of-touch liberal elite. This is where I'm from. This is my favorite football team. Go Tigers. My first concert. This is what I do for fun, and this is what I drive. Now, number 1, I know we didn't create slavery, but we still benefit from racism. It didn't end with emancipation. It didn't end with civil rights movement. It didn't end with Obama's election. It always just shifts, first from sharecropping and then to Jim Crow, then redlining and mass incarceration. Remember, it used to be illegal for black people to just exist in public. And those people are still alive. Recently, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, I was there counter-protesting. Voter suppression of black and brown neighborhoods and police shootings of unarmed black men are just a few of the many examples of present systemic and active racism in our country. This is real. Number 2, I get why you wouldn't want to think about all this. It's awful to face the truth that racism is real and that we actually don't live in a meritocracy. We want to believe in the American ideal, which is great, that all people are created equal, and that as such, our effort and hard work define our success, not our race. And to admit that racism is real and systemic dismantles this worldview that we had that said that we, white people, earned everything we got. But deep down, you know that's not true, right? Ironically, white people have been the beneficiaries of the very thing they don't like about DEI, preference and the benefit of the doubt based on skin color. Number 3, and most importantly, this does have to do with white people. Slavery and racism is a shared heritage in this country. And until everyone is truly free, we are all in some form imprisoned by systemic racism. As Ruby Sales says, white people are inheritors and benefit from a death-driven system. And that has real spiritual consequences. Juneteenth may be a celebration of emancipation and freedom for people who are enslaved and their descendants. For white people, it can be a day to lament and repent and consider ways we've benefited from this system. And for Christians, see if how we live and who we support lines up with what Jesus said about love, justice, and mercy. And one final note, we're all on this journey of understanding together, and everybody gets to start somewhere. I've said and done things I deeply regret, and I still make mistakes. And I'm grateful for the black and white people who didn't shout me down or tell me to check my privilege, but instead put their arm around me and taught me and shared with me and treated me with grace and empathy and tenderness and mercy. We all have a long way to go, and we need each other to get there. I love you, all of you, and I'll see you out there.
Accept black people to be paid reparations. I have noticed that the people who are against reparation many a times are usually racist people, because if you understand how racism, slavery, any form of bias, how discrimination has affected black people in America, you wouldn't say that they do not deserve reparation. They may have not been enslaved, but the aftermath of the enslavement of their forefathers has made life for them difficult in America, even today as we are speaking. So when I hear a vocal white person saying that they do not want black people to get reparations, it just doesn't sit well with me. And I really, really want to take this opportunity to appreciate the white people in the video for having agreed that black folks truly deserve reparations, being the descendants of the enslaved people who are taken forcefully from Africa. Family, with the knowledge, of the history, you'll get to understand why black folks in America truly deserve reparations. And I'm specifically the descendants of the enslaved, Africans. 85% of white America today oppose reparation. America's history of giving reparation. Family, America has given other people reparation before. Black people asking to be reimbursed, black people asking to get reparation is nothing new in America. They truly deserve to get reparations because American government has given people reparation, different groups reparations in the past. Let's talk about Japanese. People from Japan got reparations during the World War II. We also have the Native Americans, those that suffered the Holocaust. They received reparations. You aren't there during the time and reparations were paid. Many a times the argument is that why should we pay somebody who was not enslaved? Why should I pay and I wasn't there? Were you there now that the Japanese people were paid, were reimbursed, they got their reparations? Were you there? Were you there during Holocaust? Does it mean that now the people who were paid were not supposed to be paid because you were there? That is propaganda. It's time that people sit down, get to understand from its roots, from the root of the problem. Why are these people demanding to be paid? Why are people who were not enslaved directly asking for them to be paid today? Once you sit down and get the facts, you will never be in a position of saying that these people do not deserve reparations. And I'm glad that that came from a white person explaining to other white men and women that it's time they stop with saying that there is no reparations for Black people, because these people have gone through a lot. Systemic racism, the slavery that their forefathers got is a determinant to a lot today in America. The discrimination they are getting, the racism they are getting, the bias they are getting, any form of prejudice they are getting today is as a result of the slavery their forefathers got in the early days. After slavery, the white supremacists took the Black man as an inferior person. So over the years, the very same effect that was started with slavery went forward to date. That is why even Obama was not able to save Black people, from their problems. People thought that now that we got a Black president, for the first time we knew that Black problems would be solved. Black grievances shall have gotten a platform to find a solution. That did not happen. That just shows us the effects of slavery, the effects of segregation, the effects that started by the forefathers being taken forcefully from Africa to America to work as laborers without getting any wages. So when somebody says today that a Black person does not deserve reparation, specifically the descendant of the enslaved African, that person must be wrong. I was really, really happy when I heard a white person in the video say this, and I quote, I recognize deep scars left by slavery, and ongoing systemic racism that continue to affect Black communities. When somebody recognizes how the effects are still affecting Black communities today, that just shows you how wise that person is. And you'll never you'll never hear somebody who's mentioned such a thing come out in public and starting to say again that Black people do not deserve reparations. This is somebody who's woke, somebody who understands, the struggle that has come with Blackness in America. Some other question that a lot of people are asking: can America afford to pay reparations? If yes, which format would America use to pay reparations? There's this white brother in the video who's tried to explain, the possibility of people being paid. According to a census in 2023, Black people were 45 million in America. And he says 57% of these people, were not enslaved, were not the descendants of the enslaved Africans. So from the 45 or 48 million, according to the year 2023, we shall have remained with at least 27 million people in the time that connect directly, with the Africans who are enslaved. Then he proceeds to give an example of the Triple P program that was started to help during the time of COVID. The government of the United States of America set aside $793 billion during the time of COVID, to ensure that people could get food, or they could get support. And you notice that if that money could be taken and the money could be used for, let's say, for reparations, that would mean that at least every person from the 27 million Black Americans, every person shall have gotten at least 29,000 per person. That shows us that America has the financial strength, the financial muscle, to pay reparations to Black folks. We do not know of the figure. I cannot mention any figures right now, but what I know is that if they did that for Japanese people, they can as well do it for Black people in America. Family, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about this video. Let me know your thoughts, and I'd really, really appreciate. Kindly like the video so that it can be recommended to other YouTube users. Fam, currently we are on the road to 90,000 subscribers and to 50,000 subscribers. And guys, I'd really, really appreciate if you all took your time to subscribe to the channel. And I'd really, really appreciate. Kindly share the video with your friends and family and subscribe to the channel, fam. I'd also want you to know that the goal of this channel has always been to talk about Black stories, the Black way, and talk about Black empowerment. Because if we give the white supremacists the opportunity to tell our story, many a times our stories are distorted and they are whitewashed. Family, thank you so much, and see you all in our next episode. Goodbye for now.